Imagine waking up one day to find out that the programs you have paid into your entire working life, the ones that ensure you have a safety net in your golden years, are suddenly under attack. Social Security and Medicare, cornerstones of American society, face the risk of drastic cuts and reforms. For decades, these programs have provided millions of Americans with the means to retire with dignity and access healthcare without falling into bankruptcy. Yet now, a chorus of Republican leaders has made it abundantly clear these programs are on the chopping block. But why would politicians target such critical lifelines? And how will this affect you and your family? In today's video, we'll uncover the shocking plans Republicans have laid out for Social Security and Medicare, explore who stands to gain from these cuts, and discuss what's at stake for millions of Americans. Stay tuned as we delve into this critical issue that could redefine the future of retirement and healthcare in this country. The GOP's stated agenda. For years, Republicans have signaled their dissatisfaction with social safety net programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The rhetoric has ranged from calling these programs expensive to labeling them as unsustainable. But in recent months, GOP leaders have shifted from vague critiques to explicit plans. The Republican Party's long-term strategy to cut, privatize, or otherwise diminish these programs has been crystallized in initiatives like Project 2025 and statements from prominent leaders, including House Speaker Mike Johnson and Florida Senator Rick Scott. Statements from Republican leaders. Mike Johnson, the newly minted Speaker of the House, has floated proposals to cut Social Security and Medicare. Earlier this year, he emphasized the need for hard decisions about these programs, framing cuts as a necessity rather than a choice. Similarly, Senator Rick Scott's controversial 2022 party platform explicitly called for sunsetting all federal programs every 5 years, meaning Social Security and Medicare would need to be reauthorized regularly, a move critics argue would destabilize these vital programs. Representative Richard McCormick recently added fuel to the fire in an interview with Fox Business, stating, "We've got to have the stomach to actually take these challenges on." His remarks laid bare the GOP's intentions, cutting hundreds of billions of dollars from programs that provide critical support for retirees, the disabled, and low-income families. Where the money goes. So, where would the funds cut from Social Security and Medicare go? Two primary destinations have been cited: defense spending and tax cuts for the wealthy. Let's break it down. Expanding the defense budget. The U.S. already allocates a staggering $850 billion annually to defense spending, an amount larger than the next 10 countries combined. Yet Republicans have signaled their desire to funnel even more money into the military-industrial complex. Critics argue this would benefit corporations and contractors, rather than directly improving national security. The defense industry's influence in Washington is immense, with powerful lobbying groups ensuring that military spending remains a top priority. By redirecting funds from social programs to defense, the GOP strengthens ties with defense contractors who benefit financially from increased budgets. Tax cuts for the wealthy. The GOP has also proposed extending tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. This approach, championed during the Trump administration, disproportionately benefits billionaires and large corporations. By slashing taxes at the top, Republicans argue it will spur economic growth. However, evidence suggests these tax cuts have primarily widened the wealth gap, leaving middle and working-class Americans to shoulder the burden. This redistribution of wealth raises ethical and economic questions. While proponents claim it stimulates investment, critics highlight that tax cuts for the wealthy often result in lower revenues for public services, exacerbating inequality. Who loses? The impact of these proposed cuts would be catastrophic for everyday Americans, especially retirees and low-income families. Here's how. Retirees. Social Security provides an average monthly benefit of just $1,200 to retirees, barely enough to cover basic living expenses. Cutting these benefits would push millions of elderly Americans into poverty, forcing many to choose between food, medicine, and housing. For decades, Social Security has been a critical lifeline for seniors, reducing the poverty rate among older Americans from 35% in 1960 to less than 10% today. Slashing these benefits could reverse that progress, leaving millions vulnerable. Healthcare access. Medicare and Medicaid ensure that seniors and low-income individuals can afford medical care. Proposed cuts could result in higher premiums, reduced coverage, and restricted access to essential treatments. This would exacerbate health disparities, particularly among vulnerable populations. For instance, seniors who rely on Medicare for treatments like dialysis, cancer therapies, and chronic condition management could face prohibitive costs. Medicaid cuts would also jeopardize healthcare access for millions of low-income families, including children and individuals with disabilities. Republican voters. Ironically, many of the voters who would be most affected by these cuts are staunch Republicans. Seniors, who represent a significant conservative voting bloc, rely heavily on Social Security and Medicare. By targeting these programs, the GOP risks alienating its own base. Moreover, rural communities, which often lean Republican, disproportionately benefit from Medicaid and Medicare due to higher poverty rates and limited health care access. Cuts to these programs could devastate these areas, creating a political and social backlash. Historical context. Social Security and Medicare's legacy. Social Security and Medicare were created during periods of immense economic and social upheaval. Social Security, established in 1935 during the Great Depression, was a lifeline for millions of unemployed and elderly Americans. Similarly, Medicare, enacted in 1965, provided seniors access to health care at a time when private insurance was often unaffordable or inaccessible. Both programs were transformative, reducing poverty rates among the elderly and improving the overall quality of life. Over the decades, these programs have faced opposition, particularly from conservatives who view them as examples of government overreach. However, public support has remained strong. Polls consistently show that a majority of Americans, regardless of political affiliation, support these programs and oppose efforts to cut or privatize them. Economic implications. Beyond the human cost, cutting Social Security and Medicare could have significant economic repercussions. These programs inject billions of dollars into local economies every year. Seniors spend their benefits on necessities like housing, groceries, and healthcare, creating a ripple effect that supports jobs and businesses. Reducing benefits would not only harm individuals, but also weaken the broader economy. Additionally, Social Security's trust fund is solvent through the mid-2030s, and modest adjustments, such as lifting the payroll tax cap, could ensure its long-term viability. Critics argue that drastic cuts are unnecessary and driven more by ideological agendas than fiscal reality. Broader social impacts. The proposed cuts to Social Security and Medicare would exacerbate income inequality and deepen existing social divides. Without these programs, vulnerable populations would face increased economic insecurity, leading to higher rates of homelessness, food insecurity, and untreated medical conditions. Moreover, dismantling these programs could erode trust in government institutions. Social Security and Medicare are among the most popular and effective federal initiatives, and undermining them risks alienating citizens who rely on their stability. What you can do. If these plans alarm you, now is the time to act. Here's what you can do to make your voice heard. Contact your representatives. Call or email your elected officials to express your opposition to cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Stay informed. Follow the latest developments on this issue and share credible information with your friends and family. Vote. Participate in elections at all levels of government to support candidates who prioritize protecting social safety net programs. Advocate. Join advocacy groups that fight for the preservation of Social Security and Medicare. Grassroots movements can influence policy decisions. Educate others. Share your knowledge about the importance of these programs. Many people remain unaware of the potential threats or their long-term consequences. The GOP's war on Social Security and Medicare isn't just a political issue. It's a personal one that affects millions of Americans. These programs represent more than just line items in a budget. They're lifelines that provide dignity, stability, and hope. The stakes couldn't be higher. If we fail to protect these essential programs, the consequences will be devastating for retirees, working families, and future generations. The time to act is now. Let's stand together to defend the promise of Social Security and Medicare and ensure that America remains a nation that values its people over profits. By staying informed, voting wisely, and raising your voice, you can make a difference in this critical fight for the future of our nation. It's not just about policy, it's about people. Protecting Social Security and Medicare is a commitment to ensuring that every American has the opportunity to retire with dignity, access health care, and live with security. The fight for these programs is a fight for the soul of our nation. Let's not lose sight of what's truly at stake.